Okay, Monty, let's take a look at this week 2 assignment 3 drawing that you have in place. So a couple of the things that I had mentioned in the last assignment, some of the textures not really feeling like they're as fully developed as they could, and getting just a little bit more work being put into them, trying to get to be a little bit more specific, especially in the sphere and in the cube, could really help out things. And dealing with the background, I think, a little bit more. I think as we move into this assignment, I think the color application that you've added is, I think it places the textures a little bit clearer, but I don't think that it does enough right now. I think it feels very limited in the amount of color that's being put into place, and then especially using the color to further the texture. I think in some cases it doesn't feel like the texture has changed at all, and it really feels, I think, even more lacking than it did in the black and white, because the color just kind of accentuates how limited some of that textural stuff is. The background, you have the green in place, which I think is a good start. It'd be nice to have at least a little bit of something on the top plane, and for the background itself, I'd actually like to see a little bit cleaner of application of the marker, working with the blind, and just kind of go all the way, down with the stroke. Instead of making kind of multiple strokes, I can see kind of 3 spots where you're kind of covering the marker. And if you're going to go with the blind, which this looks to be like it's trying to do, just try to make it as smooth and even and as consistent as possible. And that basically just means cutting the edges around the shapes and then just going in with the blind from the top to the bottom until you cover the entirety. But I think the more distracting the background gets because of too much mark making or too intense a color or poor craftsmanship, not that this has intense color or poor craftsmanship per se, but it does have an abundance of mark making. There's a lot of motion going on with it. It's starting to intersect within some of the objects and affect their overall kind of symmetry and overall finish, and I think then it starts to become a little bit of a problem. And I think marker control is the main culprit with this one. Texturally, the wood texture, I think the grain needs to be more clear. It needs to actually work as a grain would. It doesn't feel like it changes from one surface to another. It just feels like you kind of laid in these marks without regard for the change in the direction of the cube, where it goes from this kind of back plane to this kind of down front plane. And there needs to be, I think, more being done to get that texture to work more effectively and to look more realistically like wood. The stone texture as well, I just don't feel like it's done much from here other than get a very kind of blurry layer of red over top of it. I don't really even think the value has changed all that much going on in here, and I just don't think it's enough. I feel like this wasn't really enough in the black and white, and I don't think it's really changed much since then. The metallic ones I think are good, although I don't again think there's much of a difference between what we saw then and what we're seeing now. And the cube on the top I think is fine as a colored cube, although the perspective feels like it's more off now than it was in the last one. I think you just need to go in and try to be a little bit more specific. Take a look at the way that grain works within wood. A lot of the times it makes rings. These rings kind of change direction as they kind of go on the different planes of the cube. The stone I think just needs more layering, more mark making. The reflections, you could pull some of the color that's in the cube and introduce a little bit of it into the reflection so that it actually feels like the environment is affecting it. But I think in general, I just need to see more as you move from one assignment to the next. I think that you have a good full day, 2 days to get additional, implementation of things done. And I just feel like there isn't enough going on here. The technique really feels like it's affecting the work, and the color additions feel very limited. Size-wise as well, this is a very small assignment. It's only an 8 by 6 inch, which is okay, but I'd rather it be 800 by 600. But if I just crop it till just I have the image itself, it is considerably smaller, 400 by 300. So if you're going to scan it and you're going to kind of crop it into the page, make sure that you're using the entirety of the image area for your drawing.